So, picture this. It's the summer of 1947. The British Empire, exhausted by war, is finally leaving India. But its departure, it created a wound on the subcontinent so deep, it is still bleeding over 75 years later. This is the story of how a single line, drawn on a map, unleashed one of the greatest human tragedies of the 20th century. I mean, the scale of what happened here is almost impossible to wrap your head around. In just a few months, somewhere between 14 and 18 million people, Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs, were forced to flee their homes. Their land, their businesses, everything they had ever known, just gone. We're talking about a population transfer on a scale humanity had simply never seen before. And look, this wasn't some orderly, peaceful migration, not even close. It was a bloodbath. This massive movement of people was met with an explosion of just brutal, communal violence. The journey that was promised as a path to safety became a march through hell. Estimates suggest around 1 million people were killed. 1 million lives wiped out in the chaos of creating 2 new nations. And you know, Mahatma Gandhi, he saw this coming. He said this 2 full years before the partition actually happened. It was a stark warning about this ideological crack that was splitting the country apart. And his words, they get right to the heart of the matter, right? The question we have to ask is how? How did neighbors who had lived side by side for centuries suddenly come to see each other as mortal enemies? So much so that they needed to carve up their homeland. How did it get to this point?
So, to really get into the why, we first have to make sure we're all on the same page about the what. What exactly was the partition?
Well, on paper, it all looks pretty straightforward. You've got the Indian Independence Act of 1947, which officially dissolves the British Raj. And in its place, it creates 2 brand new independent countries, a Hindu-majority India and a Muslim-majority Pakistan. The idea, at least in theory, was to give each community its own nation as the British packed up and left.
But here's the thing, this was so much more than just drawing a border on a map. This was about taking a single functioning state and literally ripping it in 2. The massive provinces of Punjab and Bengal, where communities were all mixed together, they were just sliced apart. The army, the navy, the government bureaucracy, even the railways and the money in the treasury, every single piece of the country had to be divided. It was an absolute logistical and human nightmare.
You know, a catastrophe like this doesn't just happen overnight. It wasn't a sudden storm. The seeds for this division were planted decades earlier, creating a path that, in the end, made the split feel almost inevitable.
What's really ironic is that when the British took direct control back in 1858, they actually unified the subcontinent politically. But over the next century, as the push for independence grew stronger, so did these separate political identities. And often, these divisions were encouraged by British policies that, well, pitted communities against each other. By the time Gandhi was speaking out against the 2-nation theory in 1945, the idea was already incredibly powerful. So that 1947 act, it wasn't the start of the division. It was just the final irreversible confirmation of it. So this growing divide, it really pushed the subcontinent to what you could call a point of no return. You had these totally competing visions for the future, and then you throw in a really hasty British exit, and you've got a recipe for disaster. At the absolute heart of the conflict were 2 irreconcilable visions. On one side, you had the Indian National Congress, pushing for a single, secular India for everyone. But on the other side, the Muslim League argued that with a Hindu majority, Muslims would never be truly safe or sovereign. They believed the only answer was their own state, Pakistan. There was just no middle ground. And what made everything so much worse was Britain's decision to just leave, and to leave quickly. They were financially broken after World War II and basically rushed for the exit. This compressed timeline, the totally inadequate plans, and the chaotic execution, it created this massive power vacuum that just poured gasoline on an already burning fire. Okay, so that's the political backdrop. Now let's turn to what actually happened on the ground. How did this political decision just completely unravel into absolute chaos in August of 1947? It all happened with terrifying speed. First, the borders are announced. Suddenly, your village, your farm, is now on the wrong side of a line you've never even seen. Immediately, millions begin to flee in terror. And then, the violence explodes. We're talking about refugee trains arriving at stations completely silent, filled with the dead. In response, leaders like Gandhi had to resort to desperate measures, like fasting to the brink of death, literally begging for peace. The numbers from the Punjab region alone are just staggering. over 9 million people forced from their homes, Muslims trekking west to the new Pakistan, Hindus and Sikhs fleeing east to India. And remember, that doesn't even count the millions more who were displaced in Bengal. Each number you see here represents a family torn apart, a life shattered. And this is the crucial part to understand. This isn't just a historical event we can file away. The partition of 1947 is a living, breathing reality that continues to define the geopolitics of South Asia to this very day. I mean, think about it. The initial explosion of violence in 1947 did eventually subside, but that line drawn on the map, it created a permanent rift. It set in motion decades of hostility, suspicion, and all-out war that are still playing out. The aftermath is stark. The violence of partition created this deep-seated suspicion that has just never healed. It left the huge territorial dispute over Kashmir unresolved, and that became the flashpoint for 4 major wars. And of course, it all eventually led to both nations becoming nuclear powers, creating one of the most dangerous standoffs on the entire planet. And you can see this pattern of conflict so clearly, and its epicenter has almost always been Kashmir. The first war erupted almost immediately, in late 1947. Another one followed in '65. The 1971 war actually led to the creation of Bangladesh, itself a tragic consequence of the unworkable division of Pakistan. And as recently as 1999, the Kargil War brought 2 now nuclear powers dangerously close to the brink. So, the trauma of 1947 isn't just a historical footnote. It's really embedded in the very DNA of both India and Pakistan. The hostility, the suspicion, the unresolved conflicts, they are all direct descendants of the decisions that were made and the violence that erupted in that one fateful year. And that leaves us with the most haunting question of all, doesn't it? Was this inevitable? Was there really no path to independence without this level of bloodshed? Or were the forces of history, politics, and identity just too powerful to overcome? It's a question that historians are still debating, and one that the people of the subcontinent are still living with every single day.